Subscribe to Emotional Echo. Now, let's begin. The cougar had been watching him for 3 days before Declan Cole finally got the shot. He'd tracked her through 40 miles of backcountry Oregon wilderness, sleeping on frozen ground, surviving on protein bars, and the kind of stubborn patience that most people mistook for obsession. She was a 6-year-old female, lean and scarred from a territory dispute, and when she finally stepped into the clearing at dawn and looked directly into his lens, Declan felt the same thing he always felt in moments like this, that every sacrifice was worth it. His satellite phone buzzed in his vest pocket. He ignored it. The cougar turned her head, amber eyes catching the first gold of sunrise, and Declan pressed record. The phone buzzed again, then again. Then 4 times in rapid succession. He kept filming. It wasn't until the cougar melted back into the tree line 20 minutes later that Declan finally checked his messages. The first was from his neighbor, Rosa Medina, sent at 6:47 a.m. Declan, I'm so sorry to bother you, but something is wrong at the house. The second, third, and fourth were from Rosa as well, each more urgent than the last. By the 5th message, she had sent a photo. His daughter, Lily, 7 years old, stood in the front yard of their Portland home in her pajamas and bare feet. It was November. She was holding a hand-painted sign that read, "I broke the rules." I am sorry. The ground beneath her was wet with frost. Her small face was expressionless, in the way children's faces go expressionless when they have been crying for so long that the tears simply run out. Standing on the porch behind her, arms folded, was Declan's mother-in-law, Vivienne Ashworth. Declan was already moving, collapsing his tripod, cramming equipment into his pack without looking, his body operating on instinct while his mind went perfectly, dangerously still. He had learned that stillness from years in the wild. It was the stillness of a predator fixing on a target. It was the stillness of something that had already decided what it was going to do. The drive back to Portland took 4 hours. It felt like 4 minutes. Declan had married Claire Ashworth 6 years ago in a small ceremony on the Oregon coast. At the time, he had believed he understood what he was getting into. Claire was warm, creative, fiercely loyal to her family. And also, he had noted with mild unease, almost entirely incapable of disagreeing with her mother. He had told himself this was a quirk, a product of a close-knit upbringing, something that would naturally balance itself once Claire built her own life and her own household. He had been wrong about that. Vivienne Ashworth was 63 years old, the widow of a Seattle tech executive, and a woman who had organized her entire identity around the concept of knowing best. She had opinions about everything: how to cook a roast, how to discipline a child, how to manage money, how to love a husband. She expressed these opinions constantly, in a tone that suggested she was simply reporting facts that you had been too slow to discover on your own. When you pushed back, she would smile the patient smile of someone who had no doubt that time would prove her right, and then she would do whatever she had already decided to do anyway. After Lily was born, Vivienne had relocated from Seattle to a house 12 minutes from theirs. She framed this as generosity, as sacrifice, as the natural thing a grandmother did for her family. Within a year, she was at their home 4 or 5 times a week. Within 2 years, Claire was calling her mother before making any decision of significance: which preschool to choose, whether to repaint the living room, how to respond when Lily had a fever that wasn't coming down. Declan's work took him away for weeks at a time. He documented wildlife for conservation organizations, film studios, and nature journals. He had spent a month in Alaska filming sea otters. He had spent 6 weeks in Kenya following a pride of lions. He had learned, during those absences, that Vivienne's influence over Claire deepened whenever he was gone. It was as if his presence diluted something and his absence concentrated it. He had tried, carefully and then less carefully, to talk to Claire about it. The conversations always ended the same way. With Claire telling him he was being unfair to her mother. With Claire telling him he didn't understand the sacrifices her mother had made. With Claire telling him, finally and quietly, that if he needed her to choose, he already knew who she would choose. He had not asked her to choose. He had filed for separation instead, 6 months ago, and moved into a 2-bedroom rental 10 minutes away. He had full joint custody of Lily. Claire had agreed to it, or rather, Vivienne had agreed to it, and Claire had agreed to whatever Vivienne agreed to. Lily split her time between both homes. It was functional. It was manageable. Until this morning, Declan pulled into his old driveway at 11:30. Rosa Medina was waiting on the sidewalk with Lily wrapped in a blanket. The child pressed against Rosa's side with the focused solemnity of a small person who knew something serious was happening and was trying very hard not to cry again. He was out of the truck before it fully stopped. "She's okay," Rosa said quickly. "She's okay. I brought her inside as soon as Vivienne went back in the house. She was out there maybe 40 minutes. Her feet are cold, but she's okay." Declan crouched in front of his daughter. Lily's eyes were red-rimmed. Her lower lip was trembling with the effort of keeping still. "Hey, Bug," he kept his voice soft. "I'm here, can I hold you?" She nodded once sharply, and he pulled her into his arms. She was shaking. "What happened?" he said against the top of her head, and he was asking Rosa, not Lily. "I don't know the whole thing," Rosa said carefully. "I heard Lily crying around 6:30 and looked out." Vivienne was standing on the porch with a piece of cardboard and a marker. She made Lily hold the sign and stand in the yard. She told her it was to teach her about consequences. Rosa paused. She took pictures of it with her phone. Declan closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. "Was Claire here?" "Claire left for her yoga class at 6. "I don't think she knew." "Does she know now?" Rosa's expression answered the question. Vivienne opened the front door as Declan was lifting Lily into the truck. She was dressed impeccably, as always, silver hair perfectly set, wearing the expression of someone who was prepared to be reasonable, but was also prepared to be deeply misunderstood. "Declan. I'm glad you're here. I think we should talk about what happened this morning before you. I'm taking Lily." He didn't raise his voice. He had learned years ago that raising his voice around Vivienne was like throwing water on a grease fire. "She's coming home with me." That's an overreaction. She needed a consequence for what she did. She took money from my purse without asking and then lied about it. That kind of behavior needs to be addressed firmly or in the November cold. In her pajamas, barefoot, Vivienne drew herself up. "A little discomfort is how children learn that actions have." "I'm going to need you to step back from the truck," Declan said. She did not step back, but she stopped talking, and in her eyes he saw something that he recognized from his work. He had seen it in dominant animals when a challenge was issued. That split second of recalculation, of reassessment, he got in the truck and drove away. Lily fell asleep on the couch at his apartment that afternoon, warm and clean and fed, with her favorite blanket tucked around her. Declan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and began making calls. The first was to his attorney, a family law specialist named Dara Whitfield, who had handled his separation agreement. He explained what had happened. Dara was quiet for a moment. "Rosa saw all of this. She's willing to make a statement?" "Yes. The photos Vivienne took could actually work in your favor. If she was documenting it, that creates a record. Combined with a sworn statement from your neighbor, you've got grounds to petition for a modification of the custody arrangement. I'd also contact the pediatrician today and have Lily evaluated. Get that on record, too. What about Vivienne specifically? Can I get a no-contact order?" "That's trickier. She's not a party to the custody agreement. But if we can demonstrate a pattern of behavior, and if Claire continues to allow her mother unsupervised access to Lily, we can argue that the current arrangement is creating an unsafe environment." Dara paused. "Declan, is there a pattern? Has something like this happened before?" He thought about it. He thought about the time Lily had come home from a weekend at Vivienne's, with a bruise on her upper arm that Vivienne had explained as a doorframe collision. He thought about the way Lily had started flinching at sudden loud noises in the past year. He thought about the nightmares. About the way his daughter had started saying sorry for things that weren't her fault. "Yes," he said. "There's a pattern." He called Rosa next, who agreed without hesitation to give a formal statement. He called Lily's pediatrician and made an appointment for the following morning. He pulled up every photo, every text, every email that touched on Vivienne's behavior and organized it into a folder on his desktop. Then he did something he hadn't planned to do. He called Claire. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight in the way it got when she already knew something was wrong and was bracing for it. "I know you're angry," she said. "I'm past angry. I need to know if you knew what your mother was going to do this morning." "No, I didn't. She told me Lily had taken money from her purse and she was going to have a talk with her. I didn't know, she stopped. I didn't know about the sign. But you're not surprised, a long silence. Declan, are you surprised, Claire? Is this something you would not have expected from your mother? Another silence, longer this time. She loves Lily, Claire finally said, and her voice had gone small in a way that told him she knew how inadequate that was. I know she does, Declan said, in her way. But love isn't sufficient justification for what happened this morning, and it's not sufficient justification for what's been happening for the last 2 years. He took a breath. I'm going to petition for a modification. Vivienne loses access to Lily at minimum until there's a formal evaluation. If you want to fight me on this, that's your right. But I need you to understand what you'd be fighting for. He heard her crying softly before he ended the call. That evening, Lily woke from her nap and found Declan at the kitchen table going through his documentation files. She stood in the doorway in her socks, hair still flat on one side from the pillow, watching him. Daddy, what are you doing? Working, you hungry? I can make pasta. She padded into the kitchen and climbed onto the chair across from him, studying his laptop screen with the serious attention she applied to everything. Are those about Grandma Vivienne? He closed the laptop. Some of them. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said I was a thief. Did you take money from her purse? I took $2 because I wanted to buy gum from the machine at her building and I forgot to ask first. I was going to tell her after. She looked at her hands. I was going to pay her back from my allowance. I was going to tell her when she came back from her walk, but she already found out and then she got very, very mad. Did you try to explain? She said explaining was making excuses. She said thieves make excuses. Lily's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. She said she needed to make sure I understood what I had done so I wouldn't grow up to be a bad person. She said this was for my own good. Declan looked at his daughter's face. He thought about all the things he wanted to say. He measured them carefully, the way he measured everything in the field, and chose the ones that were true without being too heavy for her to carry. Taking the $2 without asking was wrong, he said. And you already knew that, which is why you felt bad about it. But what Grandma did this morning was also wrong. And I need you to understand that those two things can both be true at the same time. You made a small mistake. What happened to you was not a small mistake. Lily thought about this with the same focused concentration she gave to difficult puzzles. Is Grandma Vivienne in trouble? She's going to be. Yes, is Mommy going to be sad? He reached across the table and took her hand. Mommy loves you. Whatever happens, that doesn't change. This is about keeping you safe, not about punishing anyone. Okay, she nodded. Then, can we have pasta? We can absolutely have pasta. The family court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the intervening time, several things happened. The pediatrician documented Lily's examination. Her feet had suffered mild cold exposure, nothing permanent. But the doctor noted with clinical care that Lily displayed anxiety responses during the examination that were inconsistent with a child her age and suggested chronic, low-level stress. She filed a report with Child Protective Services. Rosa Medina gave her sworn statement. She mentioned, in addition to the events of that November morning, 2 previous occasions she had witnessed that had concerned her. A time she had heard Vivienne shouting at Lily through an open window, using language Rosa described as degrading. And a time she had seen Lily come out of Vivienne's car, visibly distressed, after what had apparently been a short errand. Dara filed the petition. She was thorough and relentless and had clearly done this before, and Claire, 3 days before the hearing, called Declan. I want to talk, she said, not about the hearing. I just want to talk. Can I come over, without lawyers? She came on a Tuesday evening while Lily was at an after-school program. Declan made coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had sat with his daughter a few weeks before. And Claire looked around at the small apartment, with something complicated in her expression. She's been doing this her whole life, Claire said eventually. To me, what she did to Lily, that's what she did to me. I didn't recognize it at first because it was just how things were. It was just Mom. It was just how she showed love. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I still don't know how much of what I think is actually what I think, and how much of it is what she told me to think. I've been in therapy for 6 weeks and I'm still trying to figure it out. I didn't know you were in therapy, Declan said. I didn't tell anyone. I was ashamed. She met his eyes. I'm not going to fight the petition, Declan. I called the lawyer and told her this morning. Vivienne can apply for supervised visitation after the evaluation is complete, but I'm not going to fight you on the larger custody modification. She took a slow breath. I failed Lily. I let my mother in too close and I failed to protect her, and I have to live with that. But I'm not going to keep making the same mistake. He looked at his ex-wife across the table. He thought about the woman he had married, and the woman the years had made her, and the woman she was apparently trying now to become. She's going to need both of us, he said. Whatever happened between you and me, Lily needs both of us. Claire nodded. I know, I'm working on it. The hearing itself was quiet. Judge Patricia Almeida was a methodical woman who read every document with visible care before looking up. Vivienne was present with her own attorney and sat with her hands folded on the table in a posture that communicated dignity under siege. Her attorney had prepared arguments about the profound bond between grandmother and grandchild, about the risk of severing important family relationships, about the selective interpretation of isolated incidents. Judge Almeida listened to all of it. Then she listened to the pediatrician's report. She looked at the photographs Rosa had taken that morning from her window, the ones showing Lily in the frost with her sign, which Rosa had thought to take before going outside. She read the CPS report. She reviewed the sworn statements. Mrs. Ashworth, she said, would you describe for me the reasoning behind requiring a 7-year-old child to stand outside in freezing temperatures holding a sign? Vivienne's attorney began to speak. Judge Almeida raised a hand. I'm asking Mrs. Ashworth. Vivienne unfolded her hands and refolded them. Children learn through consequence and accountability. My own daughter was raised using similar methods, and she grew into Mrs. Ashworth. I have in front of me a statement from your own daughter that characterizes her upbringing as psychologically harmful, and states that she is currently in therapy to address the effects of that upbringing. Judge Almeida set the paper down. I'm going to ask you one more time. Can you explain the reasoning? Vivienne looked at Declan, then at her own attorney, then at Judge Almeida, then for just one moment at Claire. Something passed over her face. It might have been the beginning of understanding. It might have been the beginning of rage. Either way, she closed her mouth and said nothing. The ruling came the following afternoon. Custody modification granted. Vivienne Ashworth was prohibited from unsupervised contact, with Lily pending the completion of a formal psychological evaluation and a supervised visitation program overseen by a licensed family. Counselor. Claire was granted maintained custody and parenting time as previously agreed, with the added requirement that she complete her therapy program and that any contact between Lily and Vivienne for the next 12 months occur only in the presence of an approved supervisor. It was not total, it was not permanent, but it was something. Declan picked Lily up from school that afternoon and they drove to the coast, because he had promised her a beach trip, and he always kept his promises to his daughter. They walked along the shoreline in the gray November light, bundled in their coats, and Lily ran ahead of him the way she always did, arms out, spinning in small circles when the wind came in strong off the water. He watched her spin. He thought about the cougar in the Oregon backcountry, the scarred female who had watched him with those amber eyes before dissolving back into the trees. He thought about what it meant to be wild and free and completely at ease in your own territory. He wanted that for Lily. Not the wildness, or not only the wildness, but that ease. That unguarded confidence in her own right to exist and take up space and spin in circles on the beach because spinning felt good. She ran back to him and grabbed his hand. Daddy. Look, she pointed down the beach where a group of brown pelicans were gliding in formation just above the waterline, their wingtips almost touching the waves. They moved together without apparent effort, perfectly synchronized, each one trusting the air beneath it completely. I see them, he said. Can we film them? He had his small field camera in his coat pocket. He always did. He handed it to her and watched as she lifted it to her eye with a seriousness that made his chest ache, tracking the birds with the careful patience he hadn't taught her yet, that she seemed to have come to on her own. Got it, she said softly and lowered the camera. Let me see. She played back the footage. It was good. Slightly unsteady, the framing instinctive rather than trained. But the light was right, and she'd held still at the critical moment, and the birds moved through the frame with exactly the effortless grace they'd had in real life. "That's really good, Bug," he said. She beamed at him. They walked until the lights started going. And then they found a diner near the coast road and ate clam chowder and grilled cheese. And Lily told him about everything that had happened at school that week with the focused intensity she brought to all subjects that interested her. He listened to every word. Later, driving home in the dark with Lily asleep in the back seat, Declan thought about Claire's words at the kitchen table. About how long it could take to understand what had been done to you when it had been done in the name of love. About the difference between protection and control, and how the line between them could get blurred when the person drawing the line was also the one who stood to benefit from blurring it. He thought about what it meant to actually protect someone. It didn't mean shielding them from every difficulty or discomfort. It didn't mean making the world perfectly safe, because the world was never perfectly safe, and you could break a child by trying to make it so. It meant standing between them and harm when harm was real. It meant teaching them how to recognize harm so they could stand between themselves and it when you weren't there. It meant letting them hold the camera and find the frame themselves, even if the footage was a little unsteady. It meant staying. Not in the way he'd stayed in the backcountry when the cougar was watching him, motionless, holding his breath. But in the way he planned to stay now, consistently and without drama, the kind of present that didn't announce itself and didn't need to because it was simply there. He checked the rearview mirror. Lily slept with her mouth slightly open and her hands loosely curled in her lap, at ease in the way children are when they know, at some deep instinctual level, that they are safe. He drove them home. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you.